Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Staying at the Forefront, How Retailers Can Leverage RFID to Grow the Top Line. We're excited you could join us. My name is Megan, and I'll be moderating today's event. Today, 93% of retailers use radio frequency identification, or RFID, most often to track inventory. But as the technology evolves, it provides even more solutions for retailers. With new applications such as real-time RFID and product location, retailers can improve their operations, proactively grow their businesses, and create innovative customer experiences. In this webinar, we'll look at how retailers are implementing RFID technology, including and beyond tracking inventory, and forecast the opportunities they should prepare for in the fast-approaching future. We are thrilled to have as our experts today, JP Camel, Managing Director, RFID Sherpas, Catherine Delacruz-Polk, Senior Director, Retail Operations, Fabletics, Nipin John, Country IT Leader, Retail and Corp Technology, Decathlon Canada, and Troy Sywick, General Manager, G-Store, GreyOrange. We'll hear from our experts in just a moment, but before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Please note the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right corner of your presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click on the Help widget located in the bottom left corner of your console. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. Please know we do capture all questions. All right, now let's hear from our guests. Nipin, would you start by giving us a quick introduction to you and your work?
Yes, of course. So, hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you for having me here in this webinar. I'm more than happy to be with you guys. Just to talk a little bit about my work. I'm accountable for technology for the retail operations for Decathlon in Canada. And I've been in the tech industry for a little close to 13 years. And yeah, I love my job, what I do, and that's pretty much about me.
Welcome. And JP?
So I'm the managing director of a boutique consulting firm called RFID Sherpas. As you might guess from our name, we work with retailers in RFID, helping them go from the boardroom to the stockroom and everything in between. We're vendor agnostic. We don't resell any hardware, software, or tags. And so we work for our clients to help them to get the most out of their investments.
Welcome. Kat?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I have been with Fabletics for over 11 years, overseeing operations, training, and our activations channel, and also have been in retail for over 20 years. So very excited that we're entering this RFID front on our end.
Wonderful. And Troy?
Hi, Troy Sywick, GreyOrange G-Store team. I am so honored to be here with these experts. I've spent most of my career consulting in technology for retailers, CIOs, and innovation officers. And now why I'm here is I'm running a retail platform that one of the big offers that it has is advanced RFID technology in retail stores, just enabling the associates and the customers and the technology. So really cool discussion to be a part of. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Glad to have you all. So let's get right to it. We know that RFID technology has existed for decades, but how is it typically used now in the retail environment? Troy, we'll start with you.
Well, there's a lot of ways it's being used, but where we're seeing a lot of the use is in supply chain, inbound, tracking inventory into warehouses and distribution centers and fulfillment centers, and then really in retail stores, allowing for a much more accurate location and inventory tracking system so that the store associates, the customers, the omni-channel experience is much better. Just imagine store associates being able to go find a style, color, size of an item much faster than moving those old hanger poles and things like that and hoping they can find a medium size. So I know this panel has seen a lot of different uses here, and I had the fortunate run-in with Kat at a retail event this year, and I know you're doing some cool stuff and exploring some cool stuff. So maybe I'll kick it over to Kat to explain what they're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're currently in proof of concept. So focusing mainly on inventory management. We really are hoping to get the real-time data of accurate inventory in our stores. And right now, our process is currently manual. Our stores are counting and doing a physical inventory twice a year, and just to simply understand what we own in our stores. So by implementing RFID, we're looking to gain and create more instances where we understand the true accuracy of our inventory in our stores to make sure that what we have in stores is correct. And we actually just did a physical count, which took about 6 hours on average per store with multiple team members. We count it twice on top of that for accuracy. And as we all know from that, it takes a lot of hours, a lot of our team's energy and time. So implementing technology like RFID is going to help truly impact and minimize what that process looks like for us going forward.
Great insights. Thank you so much. Why is tracking inventory so challenging? JP, we'll start with you.
So day to day, an average retailer's inventory hovers between 60 and 70% accuracy. And this is based on multiple academic studies and NRF reporting that says, from the moment you do that physical count, which of course never gets you up to 100%, might get you up to 95, 96, 97%, you see an average of a 3% drift per month throughout the year until you do your next physical count. And so unfortunately, most people are doing their physical counts usually in the low season, which is kind of coming out at peak. And then, that they're at their worst inventory accuracy levels, just going into peak and going into the time when having that best inventory accuracy is most important. And so, there's a whole bunch of reasons why inventory accuracy does decline. It can be caused by everything from cashier errors, missed shipments, of course, shrink and theft, and many other factors. And you see most of that distortion happening in your SKU-intensive categories or your SKU-intensive styles. So your women's intimates, where you've got a lot of different sizes in a particular style color, in denim, in leggings, where there's a lot of SKU diversity leads to the potential for a lot of mistakes. In smaller SKU categories or SKU diverse categories, you generally don't see as much deviation, but overall, on average, we do see that at that 3% deviation, which leads to that operating of between 60 and 70% accuracy over the year.
Excellent. Troy, any thoughts to add there?
Oh yeah, I've been dealing with even before RFID inventory accuracy issue, especially in the fashion industries. And I remember doing omni-channel programs and e-commerce programs where we'd have to start with, they only knew the style quantity that was in any given store or any given warehouse. They didn't know this color size down to that SKU level. And even with the cycle counting, the stuff that I'm sure that Kat's company is really good at cycle counting, but the cycle counting itself creates errors, right? We're not perfect. Humans aren't perfect. So you might have a box of something in the back room that you didn't know when you were cycle counting that category. They might say, go count this category or this aisle this night, maybe not a whole store inventory. So you can actually create more inventory accuracy issues. So the confidence level in the omni-channel system, when you're talking about BOPUS, when you're talking about ship from store, or just a customer coming in to go look at something that you're saying is in the store, it's just so much more accurate if you have a robust RFID system in place than if you're trying to do manual human counting on intervals while those people are doing the other 45 things they're supposed to do that given day in the store. So there's a lot of guesswork. There's a lot of reasons where there could be errors, and confidence in the system when you're talking about software. If the retail store associate doesn't have confidence in the system they're looking at for inventory, the chances of them adopting it or using it to help the customers is pretty low. They lose confidence quickly, and then they go back to manual if they're not seeing the results, if they're not seeing the accuracy. So lots of chances for mistakes that are resolved with using advanced RFID.
Yeah, those are all very illustrative examples of how RFID helps with inventory tracking. So now let's talk about how RFID technology improves store efficiency and drives the customer experience. JP?
Yeah, so I like to think of RFID as a three-legged stool, at least the value that it brings. And if you think of one leg being inventory accuracy, one leg being inventory visibility, and the third one being inventory findability. And what do I mean by each one of those? So one of the key things that RFID allows us to do, and we've been talking about that already, which is getting our inventory accuracy up to, as close to 100% as possible, as often as possible. So you want that perpetual 95+% inventory accuracy in your stores. And that allows you to allocate better. It allows you to reduce out of stocks. It allows you to do things like your omni-channel side. So reduce your pick declines on your omni, reduce your split shipments from an omni perspective, which of course has a direct bottom line impact. And so all of those things are largely driven by that one leg of inventory accuracy. Inventory visibility is about things like, where is it in my store? Is the product in the right place? So from a back to front replenishment, so an out of shelf perspective, do I have all the product that's available in my store available for my customers to buy? Or is it sitting somewhere tucked into a corner that no one's going to find? Or what just left my store? And so I've got RFID at my exits. I could actually say, okay, this just left my store. Number one, let's start to identify trends in what's being stolen from my store. But number two, let me fill that item that somebody has just taken from the store so it's not an out of stock so the next customer can get it. So that inventory visibility piece is also very important. And that last piece is inventory findability. And the inventory findability is, okay, well, now that I know it's in the back of house or the sales floor, how do I actually find its exact location in the store? So with handheld solutions, you could use a Geiger counter. With overhead solutions, you could get an XY coordinate overlaid on a map, for instance, that allow you to know exactly where it is in the store. And the value there from a findability perspective, if you think about omni-channel, you could actually have pick routes for your product in your store to then have efficient omni-channel picking in the store that's very much like a DC wave. So you can actually say, I know that the products are distributed like this in my store. Let's guide those picks in the most efficient way possible through the store to get that product. And so those are the three key legs of the stool. And when we talk about the next generation of RFID, when we start talking about overheads, there's really a fourth leg. And I like to say that overhead readers transform the stool into a fully functional chair. And that fourth leg is analytics, because the data that these systems can start to generate is immense. And it can actually completely change the way that you evaluate the business case. It changes the way that you can actually process product in the store. It changes the end user experience for your customers if you could actually know exactly where anything is at any given time. And so those are the key kind of ways I look at that. If you look at it from a 20,000 foot level, and I'll throw it over to Kat. She can give you some real world examples of things that's happening in her store.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about how RFID can drive outcomes, we're looking for a few things. So how can we save labor and decrease repetitive tasks for our team? I want to give them additional time to spend with our customers. Of course, when we have teams in stores, we want them to engage and to drive the conversion. And I would like for them to spend time with our customers versus tagging product. And this change allows us to provide a best in-store experience for our stores and our customers.
Absolutely, absolutely, Kat. I totally agree with you. And I like the fact, JP, you mentioned about your three-legged concept. Absolutely. All of these things, at the end of the day, it leads to driving an amazing customer experience for the business, right? So for us, Decathlon being known in the industry for thinking always outside in, thinking from what the customers really want, what their problems have always been. And I think we've been able to identify a couple of them, and we tried to address them quite early. And RFID played a big role to really help us on that part for sure. So one of a few of those things that comes in my head is about the smart checkout that we have in our stores. So I don't know if any of you have visited one of our stores in anywhere in the world. You will always be amazed by how our self-checkout works. And I think it's impossible without a system like RFID that what we have put in place. But there are, of course, a lot more areas that I feel RFID can play a great role. I'm sure, as shoppers, we always are quite keen to know what are the return policy, how the returns work and everything. I think return management is also one of those topics that is quite an important areas that I think we can innovate and try to find more solutions for sure. And one of those areas that we are trying to solve a little bit of our problems these days is mainly on second life management. We are quite keen on how brands are really treating their products and how their sustainability goals are being taken care. And I think RFID can absolutely play a great role. Imagine you have this potential demand and sense of urgency of what I'm buying, is it reusable, and so on and so forth. I think RFID can absolutely play a great role, and we are already doing that in our scope.
Excellent. Thank you, Nipun. I think that's a great segue for our next question. So shifting from present day use of RFID to the future, what do you think are the next few innovations in RFID that will be game changers for retailers? Nipun?
Absolutely. So as JP already reminded us, we are already targeting a lot on achieving accuracy over inventory. And we're also talking about how we can help our co-workers with efficiency and productivity to bring in our workplaces. But there are a couple of other topics that definitely we can link with. I've already started seeing there are companies exploring robot-based inventory management. And these are a few things absolutely possible with RFID. You can have RFID-enabled sensors, and inventory can be done not during the business hours and also non-business hours, which makes it more impactful for the business of really utilizing the hours what they spend and get more productivity in what they do. And these are few things for sure I feel should be the next phase, in RFID, and we must spend time and keep an eye always on what's happening around these areas.
Absolutely, Nipin. And, I talk a few things. We talk about some of the major innovations that have happened over the last several years. There was a major innovation probably about 5 years ago that really changed the way RFID was being used in stores, and that was virtual shielding. And the ability to use software to now delineate between the actual location of product and not having to put up physical shielding everywhere to stop that signal from passing through walls. And we've seen a lot of these disruptive innovations over the last few years, especially with tag performance, for instance. We've seen tag performance really change over the last 5 years, become much more sensitive, and that's opened up a plethora of new departments and categories that can be tagged. And so going whether we're talking about fragrances and cosmetics now that are being tagged. I was just in a Marks and Spencer in London a week ago and taking a look at all the different items that were tagged in that store. And I was really amazed by, whether it's a fragrance or a bottle of lipstick or a tube of lipstick, small, big, large, liquid or not, they were tagging everything. But not just on that side of it, but you could start to do metal objects like electronics, cell phones, and other things that even just 5 years ago really weren't even possible. And so that as we proliferate into new categories, it really opens the door for new ways of doing things. One thing that Nipin talked about was robotics. And I think, there's some really interesting things that are happening on the robotics side. But beyond robotics, I think overhead readers are that next major frontier that really excite me. I don't know if you could tell it in my voice, but the opportunity for these overhead readers to drive continuous value all the time, to pick up the data, to give really meaningful analytics in the store, really completely change the game when it comes to the business case of RFID. So, and it's not a simple transition. We're talking about a much larger capital investment that has to happen, but that large capital investment comes with some really interesting things, from things like the ability to have real-time views of all your product. You could completely reimagine your store from a store process perspective. You could, change the way you operate in the store right from soup to nuts. We're not talking about an incremental change. We're talking about one single touch per product as it comes into the store. You now know where everything is. You could completely change your receiving process, your replenishment process, your restocking process, because you now know where everything actually is. And the cost of those solutions has come down dramatically. It wasn't that long ago that we were talking about $10 a square foot or $15 a square foot for these overhead solutions. We've seen those come down dramatically. I'm not going to give a price for what they currently are at today, but we're talking about significantly lower than that is suddenly making these actually something that people can use. And as as we've seen in the news, we've seen multiple retailers now start to actually roll these solutions out, which just a few years ago didn't seem like it was going to be possible. And so those are the things that really get me exciting when we start talking about innovations. And we're currently, if you talk about from penetration overall within the market, we're right around that 40 to 45 billion units tagged annually right now, which if you think about total number of units, that's about 50%, maybe 55 to 60% of total units in apparel and footwear are currently tagged. But that doesn't represent 55 to 60% of all retailers, because it's the big retailers that have started to deploy and tag products. So there's still a long runway here of retailers to deploy and new ways for them to try to get that value. And we're starting to see the people who used RFID, for the last 10 years to really start to look at new use cases and say, how can I get more out of the investment that I already have? And so there's a lot of things that are changing that really have me excited about the current and the future.
Yeah, and I would say, I would just expand on what JP's talking about. As a software provider and an engineering company, where we work with other technology companies and with retailers to figure out kind of what's next. And we're doing some pretty cool early stage learning about how all the stuff JP said, we see the adoption level is different, the risk level is different for different retailers. So you have some doing the handheld RFID, but the ones that are doing the overhead RFID readers, they tend to be the ones that are leaning into technology and trying the new stuff, and they envision this big ROI. And so if you can look ahead 6 months, I think you're going to see everything from everybody's trying out things like smart mirrors and smart dressing rooms and things like that. And those are really cool solutions, especially for the customer that wants to interact a lot more and have a higher level of customer service. But if you can envision now, along with that total view of the store and everything that's in the store, with linking that up with computer vision, advanced computer vision that uses AI, you can start to heat map customer interactions with the products themselves. So a lot of traffic is going to this mannequin or that front display or this back display, or we put these jackets out for the fall season, and in this store we have a different merchandising display and it's very successful. We see a lot of customer traffic. Or even this happens too. There's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of heavy heat map going to this vestibule, but nobody's picking up any inventory. There's something wrong here. There's something wrong with the product, how we're displaying it, the price point, whatever it may be. You are getting almost a real-time view at your corporate office of traffic in your store combined with inventory movement. You could take that to the loss prevention space and think about vision combined with RFID. A lot of the challenges retailers have in this unfortunate retail theft situation is it's really hard to get convictions. It's really hard to, it's an ROI decision for a retailer to pursue someone in the theft space because it's hard for the police to prove it, the prosecutors prove it. But now if you link inventory movement out of a spot into a bag, out the door, along with computer vision, now you have a much more provable case. So there's a use case to be discussed here about a much better loss prevention situation. So the heat maps, the loss prevention, and then I think where the biggest ROI are going to be for retailers, especially in the fashion space, is replenishment. JP mentioned that. It's not only we're out of stock of this fast moving item, this hot item, and we need to pull it from the back room to the front room, but it could be we want to catch it before we're out of stock. We don't want to miss a sale, right? So this is moving fast. We have inventory in the back. So sending a task, via software to an associate saying, we need to replenish this now. It's moving fast. We just ran a promotion and it's going crazy. Or we ran out of stock and there's one behind the counter. If it's usable, let's get it back into stock very quickly. So there's a lot of people are at the most basic level of their implementations of RFID, including in the overhead space. But when you're looking ahead, there's so much power. And once they get their handle on the basic inventory stuff, analytics and analytics driving behavior in the store and at the corporate office is going to be really cool.
And Troy, if I could add one thing there, I like to call that brick-to-click analytics. And online, we've got incredible analytics of the entire customer journey, the dwell time, what's happening at each stage of that customer purchase.
Absolutely.
What do they pick up? What goes into their basket? In what order? How is it being shopped? With this new world of overhead readers, you actually can start to get that same online analytic view, but within your brick and mortar. And so that's why I like to call that brick-to-click analytics. And that really gets me excited as well. And I'll throw one thing at you that I was asked to give and I didn't, was a real-world example of AI, which you talked about, which I love, where you could do this with handhelds, you could do this with overhead, but where you could start to actually bring in data from various systems and start to make decisions that affect how your associates in store actually do their job. And so a simple example is taking a look at your on-floor availability from an RFID system and comparing that to what's coming in a truck in a shipment, and prioritizing the boxes that have a need on the floor versus the boxes that aren't needed on the floor. Because if you only have 2 hours before store open to process all the product that comes into your store, how do you make sure you process the right boxes? And so using simple tools, whether it's RPAs or you're using AI to tell you, okay, what product should I open first? So here are the 14 boxes you should process first. Get these onto the floor for at store open. You can maximize your opportunity to sell and convert. Because at the end of the day, we're in the business of selling product to our customers and making sure that it's available.
I'd like to add on to this conversation. In terms of us at Fabletics, we have proprietary technology and we have a fitting room experience. So with adding RFID to this experience, we're going to be able to get a lot more stronger data on item conversion. So not only are we gaining efficiencies in the labor of our teams in terms of tasking and inventory management, but now we're able to share this data of how the specific item size and color is converting in the fitting room, and then being able to compare it to how that's converting online. So we're very excited to get the additional data to see how we can make decisions not only on our in-store experience, but how can that be taken advantage of from a brand perspective.
Yeah, there really is a lot of incredible innovations to look forward to. And JP, I love the word that you used, which is exciting, because it is. So let me then come back to you and ask, what is igniting this RFID innovation?
So, I mean, there's been a really long adoption cycle here. You talked about at the beginning that we've been doing this for decades. And the first use of RFID was, during World War II to identify friend and foe aircraft. So obviously we've come a long way from there. But really, we've seen adoption really accelerate over the last 5 years or so, really, and especially during or coming out of COVID, when stores were shut down, retailers didn't know what was in their stores. They needed access to that inventory. They wanted to make that inventory useful again, and they just did not have the confidence in their inventory to actually do something with that. And so I think that was kind of like when the light bulb moment went off for a lot of retailers. Now, there was obviously a lot of retailers before that, whether we're talking about Macy's, who's been using RFID, since the early 2010s, and a whole bunch of other innovators along with them. But coming out of COVID, we saw the two things kind of happen. We saw, number one, companies like Walmart and Nike and Under Armour and Adidas and a lot of the sporting goods side of the business had turned on their RFID programs. And so all of this product was flowing into many, many retailers already source tagged. And so the question became, why are you not using this data if the tags are already there? And so we saw that start to turn it on. And because Walmart and Macy's and Belk and Dillard's, they're all starting to use RFID, we've got this glut of inventory now that's flowing into that next tier of retailers as well. And so I expect that was going to start to drive innovation there as well and have them start to leverage RFID too. So, I think that spark was, I have no idea what I have in my stores. And that really accelerated things coming out of COVID to where we are today. And we've just seen that continue to accelerate, and more retailers are adopting by the day.
Absolutely. I can for sure speak for the sports retailer, JP. Yeah, it is definitely, things have been changed, in the past 4 or 5 years with COVID and stuff. We have really seen customers giving us different message now. They can't wait for products to be unavailable. There is only 2 options now, available or available. And I think it's impossible if you don't innovate in these kind of segments. And I've personally seen customers expect more. And I think it is only the technologies that can definitely help us, and how fast you can adopt this technology also matters. And again, it's a race, of course. So if you're there first, and you always see, your other brand competitors following you most of the time. And it's good to see in that space, everybody tries to be in that part. And I feel that is igniting the innovation in that area for sure.
And Nipin, something you just said reminds me of a conversation I have with my clients about what I call the RFID 100. And it's not, that it's meant to be a play on the NASDAQ, but it's, who is using RFID and how are they performing? And we consistently see retailers who are turning on RFID outperform. And, you see an example would be, Dick's just reported this week that they had an exceptional quarter. Well, guess what they just did in the last year? They turned on their RFID program. Now, of course, they did a lot of other things. They've been innovating. They're ahead of the curve on many things. But we're continuing to see those who implement RFID outperform their peers when they're able to right set that inventory. And so it's really exciting. And the proof is in the pudding. When you see those who use it do well, you see that people try to do the same thing.
I think that's a great point, and actually leads to the next question then, is are there retail segments that are ahead of the game, JP?
Absolutely. So without a doubt, apparel and footwear is far and away the leading segment within retail. That's the vast majority of penetration in the retail space has been in the apparel and footwear space. That's not to say others aren't doing it as well. We're seeing QSR, for instance, really kind of gain steam in food, whether it be grocery or quick serve. We're definitely seeing advancement there, and their use cases are very different than the traditional apparel and footwear use cases. There's our recall management, understanding what do I have in a first in, first out type model, getting the most out of their inventory. You're seeing other places as well. So you're starting to see work in electronics. We're starting to see work in fragrance and beauty, like I was mentioning earlier about Marks and Spencer. We're starting to see things in other areas as well. One thing that's really exciting for me is around product authentication. And Nipin was talking about sustainability and traceability kind of go hand in hand. And we're starting to see that being used for high-end luxury product. And so how do I guarantee that what I'm buying is actually authentic? And then you're seeing it outside of that as well. Outside of retail, I know this is targeting retail, but we're seeing it in baggage tracking, aviation. If you're running a marathon, chances are you got an RFID tag on. We're seeing in healthcare, we're really starting to see the proliferation of RFID right across all segments.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you covered almost everything in retail, JP. But then a couple of things that I know that I have personally experienced recently, it was in libraries. I borrow a book, I buy a book from a bookstore, and it is so easy to return without a human. I can just deposit it, and RFID calculates, and it tells me that I have returned on time. And based on that, the fees and calculations happens. I think that's one of the best use cases that I've personally experienced here in Montreal. So yeah, there are many places we can see the adoption is going much more faster.
Yeah, I think JP, you covered all the categories in retail that I can think of. I wanted to expand on a couple areas you were talking about. In the grocery segment, I know I was involved with a big grocer who, if you think of product or food recalls, if there's a listeria outbreak or some kind of contamination, what typically happened, and this is an exaggeration, you'd have 70,000 containers of spinach taken off a shelf of a major grocer retailer in the US because spinach is infected. And that's a lot of waste of a lot of food. Just forget about the retailer's profitability for a second. Just that's a lot of food being wasted, right? And so when they introduced RFID into that process, and now you can track what farm did this come from? What supply chain did this come through? What trucking company brought it from across the border or across the ocean? And now you can take 5,000 of the ones that came from that lot that was contaminated, and you don't waste all that food. So when you think about sustainability and did this come from a region that's known for violations of either human rights abuses or using palm oil when they shouldn't be, RFID introduces a level of traceability that is accountable versus somebody just slapping a sticker on it and saying this is from Mexico, but it's really from Costa Rica. Now you have that traceability and the systems to provide it. So there's a lot of pieces of the retail space that are using it either in the stores or in the supply chain that are pretty interesting and unique.
And one thing as well, Europe, with what you were just talking about with digital passports and DPP, that's just a whole other use case for RFID that's really proving, where did this come from? What's the origin? What's the path that came to me? So that's just a whole other use case that's really exploding from a RFID usage perspective.
Absolutely.
Great points. Thank you so much. So I'd like to take a few minutes and talk with Kat and Nipin about their experiences with RFID as retailers. So Kat, coming to you first, Fabletics is investing in more advanced RFID technologies. Can you tell me about that process?
Absolutely. So at Fabletics, I just wanted to remind everyone we're a digitally native brand. When we first started in 2013, we were just focused on e-commerce where we were direct to customer. And then 2 years later, once we introduced the physical store, we had to re-identify what we needed for retail and how we could make the technologies that were already implemented to work in this new environment. We really, as a membership model, felt that we needed to build our own systems to connect and create an omni-channel experience. And so what we really needed was a software solution for sales and acquiring members. And also, too, everyone would love to hear this, is what we're currently experiencing now, is that products weren't tagged with sales tags on the garments because it was going straight to the warehouse and then straight to the customers' houses. So that means that we had to tag products in store, which we all know is labor intensive. So we also needed to solve for this cross-functionally. So thankfully, our supply chain partners, shout out to Opal, is helping lead the efforts in creating efficiencies all the way from our factories down to the retail team in our stores. So we, now that we're looking into RFID for retail, it's actually given the ideas to our cross-functional partners across the organization, like our fulfillment centers are looking to see how they can leverage RFID technology to create efficiencies for themselves in their warehouses. And also, I like to tell our team that we're getting all the benefits of this because now our product will be tagged at the factory, so that then will eliminate the labor that we need to actually tag product in stores. Again, being able to reroute that labor that we're spending to spend time with our customers on the sales floor, to have an amazing experience, to ultimately drive the conversion to sales. So, and really it's about getting everybody on board so that they understand what challenges that we're seeing in our channel so that they can help us solve the problems, and, increasing the satisfaction of our customers and giving them the power to shop with us whenever they want, and giving them that convenience. And driving, regardless of where they want to shop, online or in store, buy online, pick up in store, making returns easier. It's all about making sure that our customers are happy and that they're getting what they need from us.
Thank you, Kat. It's great to have your perspective from the newer side of using RFID. So Nippon, Decathlon has used advanced RFID technologies for years. How did Decathlon become an early adopter, and what are some of the innovative ways that you're using it?
Yeah, interesting question. So if I remember, I think it's more than 15 years ago, we were trying to solve certain problems. And I think at that time, omni-channel business was booming for sure, and everybody around you see that they are doing physical, digital, everything coming together. And I think as we spoke about accuracy of inventory, making the products available on time and have the replenishment done, accurately, RFID was one of those modules that really played its job really well in that entire equation. And we realized having RFID process completely vertically integrated within the company in Decathlon was an important measure for us back then. We really tackled productivity, efficiency of all different processes right from manufacturing. So like what Catherine explained right now, what Fabletic is doing right now, they are doing it from the production part. I think that's the first step we did. It was 2013, if I'm not wrong. We started the first step of integrating with the production, and then all the processes that happens in all our warehouses throughout the world was not skipping the RFID process. So shipment control, inventory in the warehouse, and moving of products from one place to another place was happening through RFID, and that's where we gained a lot of efficiency in our processes. And then right now, as we speak, we're tackling a new problem because we are in a new era and new problems comes, and RFID is also absolutely helping us to tackle problems with sustainability goals. And for that, we are exploring topics like buyback programs. We are exploring topics like rentals right now. So all of these things are opening more and more doors for Decathlon to do business. And RFID plays a great role here. I mean, I remember, one of those instances in one of the stores, I saw a 3-year-old kid buying a second-hand bike. And I could see there was a small note mentioned from the previous owner that this is my cycle, and I took care of the cycle. And so I feel, RFID has just like a small bites of memory, and these kind of information can be also embedded in that, just so that, in the longer picture, we can look at that part. So this is one of the important elements that we integrated, and this became like a story. And I'm happy that, we are able to share what I little know about RFID here, and more retailers can definitely get this inspiration from what we have done.
It's really cool to hear about. Thank you so much. So you have all highlighted the advantages RFID technology provides, but I imagine retailers face some challenges when implementing it. What are some of those top challenges? Kat, we'll start with you.
Yeah, for Fabletics, knowing that we have our proprietary technology, it was about finding the vendors who are willing to partner with us or has the functionality and features available that would benefit benefit the use cases that we're trying to solve for. We're in the process of measuring what that will look like for us so we can determine what our long-term strategy is going to be. And for the transition, we need to make sure that the team understands the why behind the changes and how it'll benefit them in their day-to-day work. And then also the training piece, I would say, is the most important, ensuring that our entire field team, we have over 1,300, shout out to our retail team in the field, that they understand how the technology works and also what output are we getting from the input of the work that they're doing to make sure that this process is working as seamless as possible.
Troy, any thoughts to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, as Kat was describing that, there's two prevailing thoughts that I would say. That comment about the associates, oftentimes, this is advanced technology. This is very, very new technology. And so there's going to always be challenges, things to learn, things to teach. And when your technology team is communicating and connected to those store associates during your pilots or your rollouts, as things change, as new releases come in, you're usually operating at a good level of adoption. And when there are challenges, there's a back and forth, like, why is this happening? Oh, this is why it's happening. And their confidence, those stores, that's the front line with your customers, right? So their confidence being high means their adoption's high, means your end customer's happy. So don't forget to plan that level of on-site interaction. Sometimes it can't be on-site, but just make sure that there's a mechanism there for that feedback loop. And that's just huge, just taking care of those associates and not separating the technology team and those associates too much or for too long, because that's when doubts come in, that's when problems come in, the disconnect creates fear and doubt and mistrust. And so you don't want that. You want that connection, and you want that happy associate to be like, I love this app. I love using RFID, and they become evangelists for the rest of your team to roll it out across, the regions that you're rolling out in. The other thing I would say, and I even have called, JP and I haven't known each other very long, but I've called him and asked for his advice on this. As a software and a technology guy, when I started getting into this overhead ID, which is kind of the most advanced, biggest ROI piece of this thing, you run into physical challenges. Every retailer is different, even if they're the same format in the same luxury mall or whatever it may be. Their inside of their store is different. It's smaller, it's bigger, it's different fixtures, it's different walls, different lighting, and anything can interact or interfere with the technology we're implementing here. So you need to spend the time planning, thinking it through, talking to experts like JP, to figure out, how do I do this to make sure it works in my different store formats? And then when you change, retailers have different versions of their stores, right? When you change those versions, make sure you say, what's different in this format of the store, so that I don't mess it up. Oh, 2 levels versus 1 level. We've seen that at many of our clients where they'll have a mall store with 2 levels with an escalator in. All those things. Don't do this project plan that talks about this great software and this great technology without thinking of all those physical aspects that will be different from store to store and retailer to retailer. And then you won't have those big gotchas or oopsies. Maybe your pilot goes great, but then you get to that multi-level store and you have all kinds of problems. So the physical planning, get the right experts in the room, and the right technologists, and make sure you plan that out.
Absolutely. Just to add on that, from our experience of driving this change with RFID, I will just go one step before you, Troy. It's about, how are you going to convince your leadership that there is something new and there is cost associated with it, and how do we justify them? The ROI is sometimes not short term; it's going to be midterm or long term. I think that's one of the challenges that I've seen most of the retailers, including sometimes we are there in that same shoes, because we always try to innovate with what we already have. So as JP was explaining, RFID is not just the kits, but it is beyond gates, and it's overhead, and it's tunnels, and it's returns, and many things that we can use it. So one of those things that I have definitely faced is convincing the leadership to explain them and justify the ROI.
If I could throw one thing, one of the terms I love to use is, and it's something I learned a long time ago actually when I was at Accenture, which is the hard stuff is the soft stuff. It's all about the people and the process that is the hard stuff here, because the tech obviously it will work itself out, but it's training your people, like Kat mentioned. It's getting your field staff up and running on understanding how to use it. It's getting your technology support people understanding what they need to do. It's rejigging your processes, because you can't just drop in a brand new technology and run your stores the way you used to. So that process re-engineering and making sure that you retrain everyone to do this and really get that new paradigm shift in the minds of everyone in the business and all marching to the same beat of the same drum. And that piece of it, because these RFID programs, while people think of them as technology projects, they're not. They are business transformation projects, because RFID touches every aspect of the business, everything from buying to planning and allocation to store operations to IT and everything in between. And so it's really about getting everyone, marching to that beat of the drum and making sure that you roll out these programs in a way that everyone's on the same page.
Excellent point. Thank you. One more question before we shift over to some from our audience, and that is for Troy. What 1 to 2 tips do you have for retailers who are already invested in RFID and want to get the most out of their investment?
I would say some of the stuff we've talked about early on in this discussion about where the advanced technology is going, where the next steps are. I would think through that roadmap. Nipin mentioned going to ask for money. Also, I would think about it in the asking for money. Maybe it's not this phase, but the next phase. This is what you're going to ask your CFO or whoever you'd be asking, because you will want to have a analytics roadmap. You will want to have a software roadmap that takes this technology to those next steps that we're talking about. So you don't want just the where's my stuff that JP mentioned, where's the stuff in the build. That's great, and that will probably give you an ROI in and of itself. But don't stop there in your planning process. You need to put that vision out there of this is where we want to take this. We want to do replenishments. We want to do heat maps. We want to do merchandising compliance. I would say that's something that you would want to think about. So don't just hit the short term and the midterm. Think of the long term approach here. And I mentioned analytics. That's the gold mine here. The gold here is where are your products moving in and out and who's interacting with them. And that's the stuff that's just so valuable for your merchants and your people that decide about your assortments and your operations. And even some of the operational things that Kat mentioned that helps store associates be more efficient. A lot of that will come from analytics and software. So I think that through. Don't just think of that first step of getting something live and our inventory is accurate now. And think about like how you can turn that, X1, X2, return on investment to something much bigger for your company, whether that's in value to the associates or value to the shareholders in terms of, top line and bottom line improvement. So roadmap is a big thing that I think I would suggest people look at to maximize the investment they have. And why do I bring it up? Because I've seen and am seeing actively right now where the retailer will think small because they're worried about, getting that money that Nipin was talking about. I got to go to my stakeholders and ask for money. And so they pick out a small thing that's probably cool. And maybe that's how they get the project started, but just, kind of put the step 2, step 3, this is what it's going to look like in 36 months out there. And I think it'll be much more attractive to those executives.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been an eye-opening discussion about what's happening with RFID technology and what's ahead. So in the time that we have left, I would like to shift to some questions from our audience, starting with this one. What RFID technology, or with RFID technology changing so quickly, is it wise to invest now, or does it make more sense to wait?
I'll take that. It's probably a good JP question too, but I'll start with saying I think costs have come down, and the basics are there, right? So whether you're looking at handheld or overhead, there's not going to be some significant change. I'd ask JP that question to make sure he keeps me honest, but there's not going to be such a significant change that you should not do it now, waiting for some better technology. I think those basics are in place now, so you can get going with this, and then all of those advancements that are connecting around this space, whether it's software or hardware, you can still connect in. So there's not going to be an obsolescence that you need to worry about here.
I agree with you 100%. I think that crawl, walk, run approach is also really important. It's no need to boil the ocean right out of the gate as well. I think there's lots of value that retailers can get from understanding how this technology can be applied and moving up that value chain. We call that the RFID stairway to heaven. Let's start small and work our way up from a value perspective, from a use case perspective. And there's lots of ways to drive that value. There's no need to wait for that utopic solution, because that utopic solution never comes. I know there's retailers I talked to 15 years ago who are still waiting for that solution to come. And they could have driven tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars of value, like Decathlon has done, by implementing RFID 10 or 15 years ago. And when the next big thing comes, you could adopt that then. So I think it's all about getting the value, and there's tremendous value and payback to be received in a business if they adopt today.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question says, do some segments of retail use RFID differently?
So I guess I could jump onto that just really quickly. I think there's no doubt that different segments of retail prioritize different use cases and get different value from those use cases. And so, whether it's apparel and footwear, which really is leading the way, they're focused in on a core set of inventory accuracy, visibility, and findability. But those are kind of like the primary use case, and there's a whole slew of secondary and tertiary use cases and business cases that they build. And I think Troy talked a little bit about the listeria and the product recall management pieces that you see in grocery or in quick serve restaurants. We talked a little bit about the high-end fashion brands and the luxury brands who are using it for product authentication. We talked about Nippon talking about how they're using it from a sustainability perspective and understanding how they can go through that, and understand that full traceability and life cycle management of that product. So there's really different use cases and different priorities that are important to different people. And one client I was just talking to the other day wanted to prioritize their loss prevention piece above everything else. And normally we suggest that loss prevention is like a tier 2 use case and focus in on inventory accuracy and visibility. But to them, it was a burning issue that needed immediate attention. Others, it's a supply chain issue. Others, it's a factory issue. And so, understanding where that burning problem is, what keeps that CEO up at night, and addressing solutions that really help them solve those problems is really critical. But without a doubt, different segments of retail definitely have different priorities.
Excellent. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question, so we'll end with this one. What tangible results have retailers seen after implementing RFID?
I can take this one. Since we've been doing this for a while, I think there are many functional metrics that you can actually, closely follow and look at, how you improve there. But I would like to address the consequence of everything what RFID gives you, which is, for me, the adoption rate of customers coming back to your stores because the stocks are available, because, the customer service is amazing, because the employee can spend a lot of time with customers. So I think I will focus a lot on how a brand's or a company's NPS score is increasing, the wow factor of the brand increasing, and RFID absolutely plays a great role, at least for Decathlon. People are amazed when they look at the self-checkout system because it's magical for many of them. How it works. The basket works when you put everything down in the basket. Everything gets listed in your POS screen. So they like it. So they prefer to come back just because of this reason. So for me, it's the NPS, the customer satisfaction going up and above, organically, not just like overnight. Of course, it just goes organically.
Absolutely. And I'll throw a couple of things. When we talk about, what some of the tangible results that retailers have been seeing, there was a great study that was sponsored by GS1 and conducted by the University of Leicester a number of years ago. And they did a survey of 10 retailers who have adopted RFID. And some of the metrics that came out of that were, there was a dramatic decrease in out of stocks. There was a dramatic increase in sales. That sales number is usually made up by a combination of selling more units and selling more product at closer to full price, or what we call full price sell-through. Talking about how to reducing your split shipments on your omnichannel fulfillment rates going up, reducing shrink. That's a really important one. And so being able to really have a tangible reduction in both internal shrink and external shrink. And so, because that internal one is really interesting, because when you start to track inventory and you know when it went missing, suddenly someone's not going to steal it today and no one's going to find out about it until a year from now when they do that physical count. They might know about it, if you're using overheads immediately. And if you're using handhelds, they'll know about it by the end of next week or the end of this week, or maybe tomorrow when they do the next count. And so, and one of the things also that the study found, which I thought was really interesting, is the amount of reduction in labor that retailers found over time. And so while right up front, of course, just like any big transformation project, there's going to be an injection of labor hours that need to be done to get the project going, many of the retailers in that study actually found that over time, they actually had a decrease in overall labor costs. And that's just a few things. I mean, we could probably go on for hours, and you'd probably get mad at me if I did. But it's all about understanding that value. And most really good business cases really do document those key things, and help the leadership, as Nipin was saying earlier, understand the value of today and of tomorrow and of the future as you increment and invest more into these systems.
I think I'll add a touchy-feely aspect to this, because we talked about the numbers and the margin and the reduced out of stocks. But I think the pulse of, especially for brick and mortar retail stores, the pulse of success is with those store associates. However they're feeling is typically how your customers feel. And when you do these projects right, and that's you have to do them right. But when you do them right, those store associates love this stuff. And they feel like connected to their company, and I have information at my fingertips, and I feel supported. And when they're happy, usually it translates into your customers being happy and getting better service. So I think there's a kind of an anecdotal metric there that needs to be paid attention to.
Absolutely.
Great point. Thank you so much. I think one thing is clear. We could easily dedicate another entire hour to this at least, but we are all out of time. So we are closing out the Q&A as we reach the end of this webinar. Thank you again to Nipin, JP, Kat, and Troy for sharing your insights and expertise. I would also like to thank our audience for joining us. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.